Welcome back to the Endeavors AI podcast. I'm your host, Colin McKee, founder of Endeavors AI, where we talk about the intersection of artificial intelligence, law, business, and the new economy being built around all of it. Today's guest has spent the better part of a decade at that exact intersection, long before most people saw it coming. He's a New York-based entertainment esports attorney who built his practice at the crossroads of music, fashion, sports, and gaming. He's also a professor, a former podcast host himself, and one of the sharper legal minds I've had the pleasure of speaking with. Justin M. Jacobson, welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So before we get into the meat of it, give folks a quick picture of how you started, how you ended up here, because esports law is not exactly the most well-known kind of law, and it's definitely a big thing there in your area of the woods there in New York City. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I've been, attorney for almost 15 years now, started in the more traditional entertainment, music, sports, and fashion space, working with different creatives, musicians, songwriters, DJs, professional athletes, fashion designers, all different creatives, as well as the professionals supporting them. So agents, managers, just different business in these verticals. And always have been involved in that. And about a decade now, I really kind of noticed what was going on in like esports and professional video gaming. So for those who aren't familiar, that's Fortnite, Call of Duty, League of Legends, pretty much individuals competing for, thousands, if not millions of dollars in prizes at, events and stadiums around the world. There's been events at the Staples Center in LA, at Madison Square Garden in New York, and, venues across the world. So it's very interesting. And I've been a lifelong gamer. So I kind of always knew that, esports and video games are really big in like Asia and South Korea. And about a decade ago, I really saw it started to grow and build here in North America and the US, and just started to see individuals competing for like substantial money playing video games. And it really kind of opened my eyes to like, wow, like businesses and talent are making, thousands, if not millions of dollars playing the video games, Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat and Tekken and Smash and, Madden. There's all these games that I kind of grew up playing, and I just kind of started to investigate the scene a little bit more, look at kind of more the professional side, who was kind of, working with the talent, working with the team, servicing them, and kind of noted that there was definitely a lane for me to kind of come in with a different skill set and knowledge and just start working in it. So I kind of was working with some agents on behalf of their players first, and just kind of familiarizing myself with working with the talent and the teams and the deal structure, and really kind of just jumping into it. And then over the years, I've just started to kind of develop my own book of business, and kind of, wrote a book on esports law. So that really kind of gave me an interesting look at, how I would present it. And as you mentioned, I've been, able to teach at different universities and build curriculum based on the book and the knowledge. So it's been very interesting to see how this continues to grow, and how, YouTube and Twitch and TikTok and all these content creators are, they're like the new modern day celebrity. They're making tens of millions of dollars on this stuff. So it's, wild to just see how it all unfolds.
Right? Yeah, you're working with people making 6 and 7 figures playing video games, something that would have been unheard of, say 15, 20 years ago. It's ridiculous. It's awesome, it's all inspiring, but we never would have thought of that. So that alone is a whole different topic and episode probably to itself. But let's kind of talk about the focus of my podcast, which is AI, because AI is hitting your clients from every different direction, right? Like set the stage for us from where you sit, advising the creators and the athletes and the entrepreneurs. What has AI actually changed about all of this IP and copyright?
So I think, my practice really focuses on intellectual property, so copyrights and trademarks, and kind of the intersection of how all these entertainment and media verticals play into it. So, anyone who's, seen the news or seen what's going on in the entertainment world, you definitely see, AI being used from movies to TV to, music. And right, there was that whole song that was almost nominated for a Grammy that was completely AI made. So it's kind of, just took a huge storm of entertainment and media space, and kind of it all based on kind of the copyright usage and what rights kind of are in these outputs. And for those familiar with like generative AI, that kind of can create original images, music, movies, so you have the ability to create like a movie based on a prompt or an image based on a prompt or music based on, hey, I want to hear salsa with a reggae loop with, a trumpet every other note, right? And it's like you can get really, really particular with how you can create it. And then, the AI creates it. So it's kind of become an interesting thing in my practice to see how it's, impacting the creatives, obviously from, how it helps their jobs being easier and, more efficient with their time, as well as also, potentially replacing their jobs and how that kind of all unfolds and everything.
Right. So it's that human touch that's the linchpin. If you didn't take the time to actually create it, if you can't prove that you actually made it yourself, you might not own it. That's not your IP, right? That could be ChatGPT's IP, right?
Or the way the court says no one's IP, that it's
Right.
just or everyone's IP from, where it's like if it's not exclusive rights to the creator, then anyone can use it. Right. And I think that's the big dilemma that, the copyright law and how things are playing out is that if you use these programs to create an original work, right now the courts and the copyright office only applies protection to the human contributions. So anything that the AI puts out is kind of really a free for all. And, realistically, that doesn't work in the media entertainment business, which is kind of based on the exclusive rights and licensing of IP, right? If you don't have the exclusive rights, then you can't license them, which means you can't monetize them, and then anyone could use it. And now it's like, well, why you can't spend money and time making a movie if then anyone can use it and sell it and stream it and, you know, now you have a problem.
Yep. So what's actually settled law at this point versus what's up in the air? If you could,
Yeah, so we've had Court of Appeals decisions that were, kind of denied by the Supreme Court where essentially the Copyright Office has released this whole AI guide where only human contributions receive protection. Anything that's created by AI doesn't receive this protection. And in order to get protection in an AI created work, you need to submit an application, but only have to outline what the human contributions are and what, indicate that AI was also involved, and then they'll only protect the non-AI work. So, if you use Midjourney to create images for a project, maybe you write the story or the script, and that's protected as literary work, but the images might not be, right? So that background you have, like if you just said, "Hey, I want a sun setting over mountains," and the AI made it, like I could probably now take that image and start selling posters with it, right? And just you don't have the ability to stop me. Whereas if you, would have taken that photo, as the sun was setting and I did the same thing, you would be able to stop me, right? That would be an infringement of your copyright in that image. So, now the whole way you approach these things changes because if you're going to create something using AI, you have to understand like the limitations of where your rights are and now how that might impact the monetization of it, right? Because realistically, we want to say that we're all trying to put out creative works because we're all, we love culture and music, but you want to put food on the table and pay the electric bill too. So there always has to be, the ability to monetize, whatever you're putting out there.
right? And that's not even getting into like the training data question, which is the one that really concerns me for most clients, building products is, that part of it is, what are you actually doing to train the LLM? What piece are you putting forth yourself? So you've got exposure built into the output before you even publish it, and you never even know it until someone found it, right? Like it's
Right? The idea that, the AIs and these kind of programs are trained on this data that's existing works, right? The idea is that these bots are scraping Spotify and, if you type in Drake, Rihanna, Jay-Z, it will listen to every Drake, Rihanna, and Jay-Z song and put something that has elements of all of them. Right? So it's kind of like it's learning from copyrighted work, and that's kind of become a lot of the basis of these lawsuits is, you're training on our so how are you gonna it's really far-fetched that it's not gonna start apportioning things that maybe are one to one or pretty close to this stuff, right? And I think that's where the potential liability happens is if you're, using something that was trained on other existing works, it might incorporate something that is something else, and you might have no idea about it until that company finds that you're using, their background photo on something, right? Like Now they detected it, and now you're infringing their rights. And you were like, "Oh, well, I just got this from Midjourney. I didn't know that they would take your sunset and, you know, maybe change the mountain colors, but like everything else is the same, you know?" So now you're starting to have issues that you never even were issues or thought they could be issues. And, understanding that that's why you start seeing some of these media companies buying these AI companies to almost like allow them to scrape legally, and then knowing that if one of these outputs kind of mirrors something, it's like, okay, well, we had license to it anyway.
Yep. So, and you touched on this in our first conversation. Lawyers specifically are also getting into trouble here when it comes to confidentiality obligations and AI tools. Can you kind of speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's like every time I open up LinkedIn, there's another story about some lawyer getting in trouble for putting an AI brief, because the concept that, the AI hallucinates the answers if it doesn't know it, and it'll double down if you question it. And, what you're happening is you're having lawyers who are submitting briefs that they didn't check the citations, they didn't, do the due diligence that you're supposed to. And the problem is that when you're submitting something to the court, you're pretty much signing under penalty of perjury that you did this stuff, that to your best of your ability, that you're competent, and that this is, true. So if you're doing that and you're putting forth fake cases, now you're starting to see the courts sanctioning lawyers, suspending them, fining them, making them pay attorney's fees to the other side that has to answer your fake brief, and they have to point it out. See, that's now the new thing that's happened is now judges are sanctioning both parties if you don't point it out. So if you're my opponent and I see that you're using fake AI cases and briefs, I now need to point it out and bring it to the court's attention. And if I don't, I can now be liable because I'm not upholding my duty to the court to be like, hey, this guy, these are fake cases, right? And it's now my job to check every citation that they put forward. So it's interesting that this is kind of like evolving as we're moving forward. And, like you said, you have maybe people that are unsophisticated putting information into these programs that they don't realize, personal identifiable information, confidential stuff, deal terms, maybe a draft of a letter, and if you don't really sanitize the letter and take out any identifiable information, like the way a lot of these, platforms work is that the owners can access anything, right? And that kind of what hurts the attorney-client privilege is that the software developers can essentially look and, see how they're doing or what like, they have unlimited access pretty much to whatever you put in there. So that's where you start to have problems. So not only do you have those potential violations for not understanding how to use it, ethically, now you have people that are using it and it's giving you incorrect stuff, and you're kind of like saying under penalty of perjury that this is right, and you kind of researched it. And now you're like standing in front of a judge and you're just like, I'm so sorry, I was so rushed. And it's like, well, like you're not so sorry. Like this is like you are doing this, right?
Right.
Like so
Yeah,
I
it's
just,
inexcusable. It really is. That's the thing. And it's not AI that's the problem. It's people being careless, lazy, and then signing their name to it.
yeah, not it's my associate. Like, I'm sorry, like that's always the other one where my associate used it and I just, was in a rush and I didn't get double checked it. It's like, well,
Right.
you know, that's not good enough. Like you have to check what your, people that report to you do. That's part of being a supervisor in these kind of worlds.
Right. Yep. Exactly. So, okay, let's flip it a little bit. You had a really good framework that I'd like you to walk people through. You called it the icing on the cake, because you put it really well. If you recall our first conversation, what's the icing on the cake?
Yeah, I think that people need to kind of look at AI and generative AI and all these programs as a way to kind of build and refine what you do, not to kind of make it the whole crux, the body of your work, right? That's where, these individuals that submit this fake brief have problems, right? Like if you have done it right and maybe it's like, okay, maybe I want 2 or 3 more cases, maybe I want a case in another jurisdiction, right? To add the icing on the cake. Okay, you can definitely find 2 other cases that hold this using the program. However, if you're like, you put it in there and say, "Hey, generate this motion for summary judgment based on this and this," and you just take it to do the whole work, you shouldn't be surprised when it's, doing what you asked, even if it's not necessarily the right answer, right? And I think that when people use it to do all the work, right, to bake the full cake, that's where you start to have issues. Whereas if you use it to kind of add the finishing touches, that, the icing, the prettiness, to refine it, it really can be used to perfection. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that you need to not only know how to use it legally and ethically, but you need to know what its strengths are and what its weaknesses are, right? Because every platform is good for different things. And, every different type of AI software has things that it's good at, right? There's certain things that certain AI platforms can just do effortlessly, right? Like digesting information, summarizing stuff, like those are their home runs, right? So if you're like, okay, this is the initial deal term, summarize the most important points, and that gives you as like a reference for a starting point, that's good, right? But if you're like, hey, do that and do my whole job, that's where you start to have issues, right? That's where, one of these LinkedIn posts this morning where it's like, the AI made everything mutual. And it was like, well, some of these things don't need to be mutual because it addresses the mutuality in the next paragraph, right? So it's like, it doesn't even understand how to actually do things properly. So I think that that's the big thing, is that if you use it to kind of do your job, you might have problems. But if you use it to refine and to do a better job of what you've already done, I think that's kind of the sweet spot. At least now. I don't, I can't predict 5, 10 years down the line or even 3 years, but especially now, those people that are using to kind of do the full grunt work, the bulk of their work, that's where you're going to have more problems, right? If you're like, hey, make this logo, and it's like, I want a dolphin with, snowflakes and whatever, and it does it, that's the whole job, right? Maybe you're going to change some of the colors, but ultimately that image wasn't really made by you. So you, might not have rights that you think you do to it.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, and that applies to creators, to athletes building a brand, an entrepreneur that's using AI to build a product. It's across the board. So, what should creators and entrepreneurs actually build into their contracts now? Give us some practical stuff when it comes to AI.
Yeah, I mean, I think that especially if you're an individual using third-party service providers, whether they're editors or, photographers, videographers, any of these people that are providing services that they could use AI for, is you need to build in, warranties and indemnifications that protect you against potential issues, right? If they don't have the proper licensing, if their use potentially is an infringement on someone else's and now you're liable, you need to have the ability to kind of turn around and hold them liable for these issues. So now you have to make sure that anyone that's using, AI for work discloses what they're doing so that you understand what AI did and what, the human did, especially if it's something that you might want to have protection in and monetize. So now you have to kind of build these into the agreements, because if you don't obligate, the service provider, the individual, to do it, then they don't have to do it, right? So now you're trying to understand how these parties may use it. And again, they may never use it. But if I'm a web designer or a logo designer, I might, use it to kind of cut some of the, time to do things. So if that gets me in trouble, you need to understand that I shouldn't be held liable for your mistake. So you're starting to really have to build that in and educate the client of like, okay, this is why we have to do this. Because if they use Mid Journey to make you a logo and it ripped off someone else's logo, and you are now in trouble, or like, made an album cover and now you're getting sued because you're a bigger artist or a bigger notable person, that's going to be very damaging to you, and you need the ability to kind of at least try to recoup something, or at least hold them responsible and get your money back at the least result. So, you have to kind of understand, from a legal professional side, how other people might be using it so that your client can be protected. And then you also have to understand how they might use it, right? Like I have a musician who uses it to a certain degree for certain stuff. And it's like, okay, well, you have to understand that like there are certain things you don't own rights to those contributions. So if like you use a cool saxophone, it's all AI generated, anyone could take that saxophone and use whatever they want with it. So just be aware of where your rights extend to and what they don't extend to. And, so you're kind of advising on both sides of it.
Yep. And that almost answers my next question, but I'll ask it anyway. So, for anyone who doesn't have an attorney yet, and I would encourage anyone who's playing around with AI and they're a creator to look Justin up. He can lead you the right direction. What's the one question that they should ask before they ship out anything that's AI assisted?
I mean, you have to make sure that you have the commercial rights. Like, I think that's the big thing is the difference between non-commercial and commercial rights. If you're going to be using the generative AI work, whatever the AI creates for a commercial purpose, right? Monetization, making money off of it, even from ads on Instagram, right? As soon as you click monetization button, now you're doing it's a commercial use. So you have to understand if you even have that use. And usually a lot of these things have enterprise or business models where you have to pay a larger fee to be able to get those commercial rights. So I think you really have to understand what rights you have because if you use things outside of those rights, you could have a problem. And you can now have, OpenAI sending you an interesting letter if you're, using things outside their terms.
Yep, well put. So, what's one thing any creator or entrepreneur should do this week when it comes to AI?
Understand, the strengths and legalities of what you're using. It's better to know than not to know. And it's so many times when people are like, oh wow, I didn't realize I thought that I could do this. It's like, well, that's why you have to read and know. And ignorance of the law isn't a defense. And I think that some people don't realize that. And it's like, just because you didn't know, that's not good enough, right? Like you need to inform yourself. And especially if you're going to use this to make money, use this as a business, as a career, you definitely need to know what you can and cannot do. And if you don't understand, then you need to get someone that does and someone that can help advise you so that you do the right thing, that you don't spend time and money promoting a song that's all AI generated, only to find that now everyone can take the song and do whatever they want with it. And no record label is going to pay you money. No publisher is going to pay you money because anyone can use the song. So they can't make money off.
Yep, there's nothing that's really yours to own, unfortunately. IP law is headed, say, in the next 2 years' time.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're starting to see, legislation at the state, federal, and even kind of the international level. You have different international policies, the EU directive, and obviously we have some stuff that was kind of trying to pend here. Different states have enacted certain stuff related to deep fakes and name, image, and likeness in AI and AI impersonations, and some of the way to just kind of protect notable people's, unauthorized usage, whether it's against fake political ads, right? That was a whole big scandal during during the election of kind of people getting this like fake AI, message saying you don't have to vote, the election's over. And, then you have, things of like fake sexually graphic material of celebrities, right? A big thing of fake nude photos that aren't real and just how life and, they can be. So there's just so many things that I think the legislature is going to involve themselves in just because of how impactful this is to all areas of society. So I think we're going to see how that leads. And then as a result, you're going to see how the courts follow suit. Because right now there's a ton of lawsuits pending everywhere across the country by all the big media companies against all the big AI companies. So usually when you have powerhouses squaring off against each other, things start to happen, policies start to get implemented. So we're going to see how the legislation and, politics unfolds and then how that impacts kind of how everyone else is going to have to act.
Yeah, well said. So, last question: where can people follow you and find out about your work?
So yeah, definitely follow me on, internet is jmjesq.com is my website that has contact info and different articles and information. Then we also have the ability to go, Instagram and all these other social medias, Justin Jesq, and follow me on LinkedIn. So always happy to connect. My DMs are open.
Justin, this is exactly what I'd hoped it to be. It's practical, real, no fluff. I appreciate you bringing your expertise and being straightforward with it. It's information that people really do need to hear, to be educated before they start letting these tools run wild and set expectations properly, right? They've got to do the work in order to get paid on it, right? So, for everyone listening, links to Justin's work and will be in the show notes. And if you have any questions as far as building things with the AI, hiring and how to use it, that's what Endeavors AI is here for. So we're open to that conversation as well. So thank you for your time, Justin, and for your expertise. And we will see you on the next episode.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.